For over 3 decades, CHM's Fellow Awards have recognized technology pioneers, legends and unsung heroes who've advanced the field of computing and propelled humanity forward. The first fellow was Grace Murray Hopper, a trailblazer in software programming. Since Grace, CHM has presented this prestigious award to 90 fellows, including many who are in the audience tonight. Truly, these distinguished fellows have changed our world. Here to present the 2021 Fellow Award to Andy Van Dam is John Crawford. A student of Andy's, John developed software tools for the Intel 8086 processor and then transitioned into a role as Intel's microprocessor architect for the first 386, and then a number of subsequent processors during his 35-year career as a software engineer and computer architect at Intel. John holds 51 patents. For his seminal work on industry-standard microprocessor architectures, John was honored as a CHM Fellow in 2014. John Crawford.
You're going to go first. Here we go.
Thank you, Dano. I'm honored to be a Fellow of the Computer History Museum. The CHM Fellow Award is a special accolade considered one of the highest marks of achievement in the computing field. As a Fellow, I feel privileged to present this prestigious award to Andy here tonight. I first met Andy Van Dam as an undergrad student at Brown in the spring of 1972, and that's coming up on 50 years ago. I had arrived at Brown the previous semester as an underachieving teenager. A math study buddy encouraged me to make a late course change for that second semester of my freshman year to take Applied Math 44, Introduction to Computer Science. It didn't take long for me to become hooked and commit to a computer science major. Andy's CS program gave me an intellectual challenge to excel against. It was a lot of work, but the work was carefully directed and supported to develop knowledge in many areas of computer science. Andy is best known for his seminal contributions to computer graphics and human-computer interaction, but I benefited from the broad reach of his scholarship and also his talent for extracting grant money. In my junior year, I was hired as a research assistant on a compiler project. I was to build the symbol table for the Language for System Development compiler, also known as LSD. Yes, it was the 70s. This gave me some valuable experience that provided a firm foundation in machine-level programming, compiler construction, and the software-hardware interface. This provided a strong base that later grew into a career in software development and then computer architecture at Intel. Andy not only built an outstanding academic computer science department at Brown, he also directed a lot of his legendary energy into advising his students. He helped me with course selection, grad school and job references, and he exercised his connection with Jim Foley, then at University of North Carolina, to recommend a research assistant position for me to pursue a terminal master's degree there. That's the highlights of my history with Andy. I'm sure there are thousands of similar stories from lives that Andy has influenced. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome back Andy. Hi, Andy.
John, that was lovely. Thank you.
Your ongoing work has advanced computing and impacted so many people that it's very fitting for you to be named a Computer History Museum Fellow. So here we go with a formal award presentation. Andy Van Dam, on behalf of the Computer History Museum, it is my distinct honor to present to you the 2021 Fellow Award for your lifetime of contributions to computer graphics, hypertext, and education.
And there we have the magic of moving pixels. Thank you so very much, John and Norm, Ed, Brad, Ingrid, and all the friends who recorded videos for those really lovely, I have to say, somewhat rose-colored tributes. And I'm still waiting to hear what Dave S. is going to say. Now, when I told my wife the good news that I had been elected to this pantheon of the computer age, her immediate response was, "Wow, you've finally become a museum piece." Well, it's such an exceptional and humbling honor for me to be so, to become a fellow, and it's really a special joy to do it in the same year that my dear friend Raj Reddy has that great honor as a 2021 fellow. There are many, many people I want to thank, starting, of course, with Dana Lewin, the selection committee for recognizing me with this superb award and with this amazing production. My gratitude, therefore, to the people who created it, Kirsten, Marguerite, John, Michael, and their crews. And then a very special thanks to the ever-patient Mark Weber, who's not just a Brown grad, but who interviewed me 3 times over 3 decades for his amazing oral history. I also really want to acknowledge some close friends, colleagues that I've looked up to and learned from over the years, each in his own way, a role model of invention, of impact, and of humanity, particularly Ed Catmull, Raj Reddy, Don Greenberg, Henry Fuchs, my Brown colleague Spike Hughes, and Bill Buxton. And a special thanks to my brother, Jim Foley, for being such a great partner and pioneer in human-computer interaction. Now, above all, my heartfelt thanks to my wonderful family, my beloved wife of more than 60 years, Debbie, and our 3 daughters, Elisa, Lori, and Catherine. They often bore the brunt of very long hours and long absences, and not just supported me, but put up with me as I focused on my work. I don't think I ever got the work-life balance thing properly worked out. Now, the persons who inspired me most, particularly when I was growing up, were my father and mother, who not only instilled the work ethic in me, but more importantly, taught me by example what real perseverance looks like in the face of unfathomable trauma, heartache, and hardship. My father's motto till the day he died at age 102, strive to optimize. So life, as they say, is a journey, but is often not a planned one. The major theme of my personal story, as you've already heard, is the outsized role of happenstance, pure luck. As Raj Reddy said during his acceptance speech, we were fortunate to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. Now, you heard about my first happenstance, which was the traumatic internment. After that, things improved dramatically, especially when we were able to immigrate to the US. But I had no grand plan. When I was young, my plan was basically seeing where the road would take me. All I knew for sure is that I wanted to be a scientist like my dad, but not exactly like my dad, certainly not marine biology, too damn much memorization. And being a teacher, no, that wasn't in the cards at all. Now, most career advice that I give to young people is follow your passion. But even in the beginning of grad school, I wasn't at all sure I'd found it. But then I got lucky again, as I mentioned, to find computer science, then interactive computer graphics, and then my career in the noblest profession, one that lets me continue to have my vocation and my avocation be one and the same to this day. I am privileged to the max. Another huge stroke of luck was getting hired by Brown. I always wanted to do things my way, and Brown pretty much let me have a free hand, both in the research topics and in the kinds of courses I wanted to teach and how I wanted to teach them. And the most controversial thing, as you heard, was having undergraduates act as teaching assistants, taking on all the roles of graduate TAs. But because they had taken that same course the previous year, had more empathy, more knowledge of the assignments, and they knew what the struggles were all about. Not coincidentally, for me at least, they were an order of magnitude cheaper and in much greater supply than graduate students would have been. So the major thread through my entire career has been the pervasive use, indeed, I would say reliance on undergraduates, not just in teaching, but also in research. I've never taught a course nor honchoed a research project where I didn't actively use undergraduates. And in fact, many of the ideas, both courses and projects, came from the undergraduates. Among the many, many students from whom I learned more than they possibly could have learned from me, and whom I still consider as part of my extended family, are dear friends that you heard from already today, but also many others, including CMU's unforgettable Randy Pausch, Columbia's Steve Feiner, University of Minnesota's law professor, not CS, Carol Chomsky, and Google Research's David Salison. Sadly, one of my very first Brown students, dating from my first year, 65, Bob Monk, passed away just last year. He became my friend, colleague, led equally brilliant undergraduates like Ed in inventing well beyond the state of the art, and co-taught courses with me and his own courses for a number of years. So, switching topics, let me preview an upcoming segment. As you heard, that over the last decade, I've become increasingly concerned with what's now called socially responsible computing, or computing for the social good. Therefore, I was delighted to hear that CHM included a world-class panel on this important topic, including one of my most accomplished former students and dear friend, Dana Boyd. Now, for the younger generations, I'd like to conclude by sharing what I tell my advisees during freshman week. As you heard, my life has been a bunch of zigzags. My plans never materialized the way I thought they would, and I rolled with it. When I saw something that I thought was better than what I'd seen before, well, I went that way without being stuck. So be open, be opportunistic in exactly the right way. Recognize that, unlike me, you're going to have a dozen jobs, if not careers, before you retire. Indeed, if you retire, and have a blast exploring. Now, folks, this event has been truly an amazing experience, one I never imagined, any more than I imagined the giant leaps and strides that our field has made, starting with batch computing to today's online world. Becoming a fellow and having this incredible production in my honor is fabulous. Again, my grateful thanks to the CHM and its super people.
Congratulations, Andy. I'm so honored to be the very first person to congratulate you as our newest fellow at CHM. Building on Andy's contribution to the history of computing, we will now turn our focus to digital technologies of today, especially graphics for their innovation, application, and impact. Here to share the story of Andy's impact on his life, and in turn, his impact on others, is a former TA of Andy's. He's an Adobe Fellow, an Academy Award winner for the impact that After Effects has had on the film industry, and an Emmy Award winner for the impact that Adobe's character animation tool has had on broadcast. Please welcome Dave S.
Congratulations to Andy for receiving the Computer History Museum's Fellow Award. And thank you to the museum for this opportunity to share stories about Andy and his impact on me, the graphics industry, and the world at large. Andy was already a legendary professor in the computer science department at Brown University when I started there in 1986. I first got to know Andy as a teaching assistant for CS11, the introductory computer science class. TAing for Andy is not just a regular TA job. TAs for Andy also write and participate in educational skits. As the humor TA, one of my jobs was to extend the decades-long tradition of delivering a drink for Andy in a different way at the start of each class. This ranged from a simple bottle of water to a hollow pumpkin billowing dry ice vapor to a bottle of baby shampoo filled with apple juice, as another former TA recalled on the I Know Andy Van Dam Facebook group. The skits, while flamboyant, are not frivolous. Besides entertainment, they serve a larger purpose of bonding the TAs to each other and to the students. Andy has always been thoughtful about the community he creates, employing a diverse range of TAs to encourage balanced representation in computer science, especially for women. Andy connects with you, hard, literally. He's known for rib-crushing hugs. To further the connection, every year, he and his wife, Debbie, invite the TAs over for a delectable dinner. If Andy is involved, the food is sure to be top-notch. Eating out with Andy at his usual haunts often elicits a visit by the chef. There's a Japanese word for when the chef gets free rein to make your meal, omakase. Whenever possible, that's how Andy rolls. It's a nice parallel to how he treats his TAs. Give them power and trust them to do great things. I enjoyed working for Andy so much that I signed up to TA CS11 again the following year, and then, for my senior year, got the coveted/feared head TA job, along with David Herbstman and Sarah Allen. The job was extremely challenging, but with Andy's trust in us, we rose to that challenge. When you become head TA, the previous year's leaders pass down the head TA missive with details on how to run the class, along with helpful tidbits about working with Andy, including his 4 commandments. Thou shalt not power trip, thou shalt not flake, thou shalt be proactive, and thou shalt not assume. He usually followed that last one with the old adage of, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Andy co-wrote the world standard computer science textbook called Computer Graphics Principles and Practice. When I asked a group of Adobe principal scientists about who had been influenced by Andy, I received a flood of responses, many noting that the book was currently within arm's reach or visible just a few steps away, as it has been for me for 3 decades. Bringing it back to my co-head TAs, after graduation in the spring of 1990, Dave H. and I founded a company with 2 other Brown grads, and Sarah joined us soon thereafter. We wanted to become a hypermedia publishing conglomerate, using everything we learned from Andy about hypertext. 2 years later, in our last-ditch effort to save the foundering company, we created a visual effects and motion graphics application called After Effects to ride what looked like a promising new wave of video production migrating to desktop computers. Skills learned in Andy's CS224 computer graphics class paved the way. We shipped version 1.0 in January 93 and found immediate success. After an acquisition by Aldus Corporation later that year and a merger with Adobe Systems in 94, it continued on as Adobe After Effects, which is still the leading motion graphics tool today. After Effects would not have existed without Andy's role in gathering and training us. In addition to Sarah, Dave H., and me, many other Andy-trained developers have worked on After Effects, including Dan Wilk, Michael Natkin, Scott Snibbe, and Dave Sklar. If you follow the thread of Andy's influence to the next level, the countless projects that have been created using After Effects are inescapable if you watch TV or movies. Add in Sarah's role in creating Flash's RTMP video streaming on the web. Then add in Andy's impact on Pixar and include all of their audiences. It's not possible to enumerate all the examples of Andy's students changing the world, but it's fair to say that Andy has impacted the vast majority of humans on this planet. Even the After Effects rendered motion graphics that the Computer History Museum produced for this event were possible because of Andy. Before I finish up, I'll just note that it did cross my mind that, as the missive warned, I shouldn't assume that Andy will like this tribute. But to keep it a surprise for him, he is seeing it right now for the first time. One thing I can count on: if he doesn't like it, he'll tell me. Honoring Andy as a Computer History Museum Fellow feels exactly right to me. I can't think of anyone I know who has positively affected more people. Andy, thank you for everything you have done for me, for computer graphics, and for the world.
Thank you, Dave S., for sharing your reflection, and those photos were amazing. It's great to consider this ripple effect that's emanating from Andy to literally millions of people around the globe. We are truly witnessing a creative explosion, and a lot of cutting-edge work is now being done in virtual reality. So to demonstrate current computer graphic tools and show how they empower human creativity, we have asked 2 extraordinary artists to accept a little challenge. We asked them, can you create a new work of VR art in front of us tonight in just 20 minutes? Well, fortunately, Giovanni Knockpill and Estella Tse both said sure, and they are both with us tonight. So first, let me introduce Giovanni. He is a senior design evangelist and creative director at Adobe. He has served as a digital model supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic, and a 3D artist at Valve, and as an art director at Facebook. During his time in tech, Gio has pioneered emerging consumer products for the world of virtual reality. So please give a warm welcome to Giovanni Knockpill. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Estella Tse. She is a virtual reality and augmented reality creative director and an artist, and has been an artist in residence with Google, Adobe, Snapchat, Cartoon Network Studios. She integrates emerging technologies and visual storytelling into a new art form. Her work has been featured on Forbes, CNET, The Australian, among others. Welcome, Estella. Hello. Gio, I see that you have a VR headset. You have your computer, and I know that is off stage. But can you share a bit about the tools that you're using tonight and the process too?
So I'll be using Adobe Medium for my sculpture that I'll be demoing for you all. And then after that, I'll be transporting the sculpture onto Adobe Substance Stager, where I'll be integrating my virtual reality sculpture into reality with a photographic backdrop to make it look photoreal.
So Estella, it looks like you have a little bit of a different VR headset. I'd love to hear about your process and tools.
Today I'm going to be using Google's Tilt Brush. It's a virtual reality painting program. So I'll be painting and sculpting in virtual reality, and you'll see that in live action.
I can't wait to see you work. So now it's time for me to reveal the design challenge. Here at CHM, our vision centers on building and harnessing technology to shape a better future for humanity. So this is your challenge. Create a new piece of art that brings this museum's vision to life. You're gonna have 20 minutes. So are you ready? Set, go. Wow, you can see Gio's creating it's a 3D sculpture. He's got like a head, and now he's building out a body. And we can see on screen that Gio is, what he's seeing in his headset, we can actually see that on screen right now. One more cue. This is fascinating. Now let's go over and see what Estella is up to. So cool. You can see that she's painting in the air with tilt brush. Wow. It's so fun to see what they see through their VR headsets. It's like seeing them moving with their heads, their hands, their body. It's almost like performing art. So while Gio and Estella continue to work, we're going to shift gears to explore one last topic that has been and continues to be very important to Andy, and that's ethics and computing. And to lay the groundwork for this discussion, I want to turn it back to Daniel, but don't worry, we're going to come back to Gio and Estella to see their final works of art.
Well, thanks, Nancy. I can't wait to see the artist representation of our CHM vision. As we consider how technology can help shape a better future, there are thorny issues to navigate and challenging choices to make in our own lives and for our organizations. How do we deal with privacy, monetization of our data, misinformation, disinformation, and more. These are the issues that Andy has been raising in his classes for years. Recently, he has extended what he calls a call to arms to address the negative impacts of technology on society. And with us this evening to further explore Andy's call to arms, to share their views on the most pressing issues for tech and society, are Eric Horovitz and Dana Boyd with moderator James Manika. Eric Horovitz serves as Microsoft's first chief scientific officer, where he provides leadership and perspectives on issues and opportunities at the intersection of technology, people, and society. He currently serves as a commissioner for the National Security Commission on AI and chairs the line of effort on ethical and responsible AI. In turn, Dana Boyd is a partner at Microsoft Research and the founder and president of Data and Society. She's a visiting professor at New York University and focuses on addressing social and cultural inequities by understanding the relationship between technology and society. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a director of the Social Science Council. She was also one of Andy's students. So to lead this discussion, we're in really good hands with James Manika. James is a senior partner at McKinsey & Company and chairman and director of the McKinsey Global Institute. He's authored books and articles and worked with companies on issues related to innovation, the digital economy, and the future of work. He serves and has served, in the Obama administration and was appointed to Governor Newsom's co-chair the Future of Work Commission for the state of California. Take it away, James.
Thank you very much, Dan. Dana and Eric, I'm delighted to be in conversation with you as we celebrate Andy today. By the way, congratulations, Andy. But let's dive right in. When it comes to ethics and socially responsible computing, what are the one or two top of mind issues for you and why? Let's start with you, Eric.
Well, I share Andy's passion about harnessing the advances in computing to change the world for the better. But like Andy, I've also been concerned with the rough edges of computing applications on people and society. I'm particularly concerned about what I would call rough edges with uses of AI technologies. And these include both the inadvertent effects like amplifying societal biases and violating privacy, but also malevolent pursuits. So top of my list are malevolent uses of AI. And these include AI-powered persuasion and propaganda, and the use of AI methods by authoritarian, autocratic regimes to squash freedoms. On the AI-powered persuasion and propaganda, I see AI methods being harnessed by malevolent actors to undermine the understandings that people have of events in the world. On this front, generative AI technologies are being combined with advances in graphics. These advances are descendants of the graphical methods that Andy pioneered with his colleagues, but now they're being used to generate false impersonations and false realities. Such synthetic media, often called deepfakes, really do threaten the foundations of democracy. If not checked, these methods can carry us into what I've been calling a potential post-epistemic era, where we can't distinguish reality from falsehoods. Now, beyond deepfakes, a related and synergistic concern is are AI technologies being used by adversarial regimes to manipulate people? The unprecedented availability of data, telemetry, and feedback of the form that comes as a standard with commercial social media platforms, these can enable malevolent actors to do AI-powered psychological operations. And these kinds of psychological operations or campaigns can extend in time and be deeply personalized, aimed at persuading, shifting beliefs, having deep influences on individuals, on populations. These are AI-powered cyber attacks on human cognition, on the minds of people. Now, I'm optimistic that we can apply computing methods to help address the challenge of deepfakes, including the use of new watermarking, cryptographic methods to authenticate the source and history of media. We're also going to need insightful regulations to bring laws to bear on false impersonation and the fabrication of events. Now, I'll just mention my second key concern, and that's with AI methods being used by these authoritarian autocratic regimes for surveillance and inference about their citizens. These uses of AI can lead to unprecedented oppression, forms of tracking and control that are more concerning in many ways than the dystopian visions of George Orwell. Cameras can be pointed at town squares and stadiums and enable authorities to continue to analyze and recognize the whereabouts and activities of thousands of people. And specific individuals can be identified in large crowds. Multiple signals can be employed to do persistent monitoring and inference, providing new forms of what I would call precision triangulation about people's locations and actions. Thus, AI technology can be used by authoritarian regimes to further suppress freedoms, stifling assembly and expression. So coalitions of like-minded nations are going to have to come together to assert norms about how AI should not be used. Such efforts may one day lead to special extensions to international conventions, like the international human rights laws, to address oppressive, unacceptable uses of computing technologies.
Well, those are two big ones, Eric, and that's pretty dark stuff. But Dana, what do you think? I mean, you've been thinking about these issues too. What's top of mind for you?
Well, it's funny. I've been thinking about these issues in many ways for 25 years. When I got to walk in as a freshman to be a student of Andy's, and we've been able to have this conversation ongoing for decades, which is just a delight. So first, I just have to say congratulations, Andy. You know, you have inspired so many people here, you know, telling stories, and I hope that you're enjoying this evening. And so it's fun to be on this panel to rehash some of these conversations that we've been having and think about how they extend. And I think this is where, you know, to this question of where do we think of the major issues of ethics, you know, Eric just gave us some pretty dark places. And I think part of it is, for me, I think of ethics as going more macro than that. Ethics is a contestation, a way of negotiating what we think of as important about the social world, what we care about, what we value. And it's about those moments of contestation. And what Eric has highlighted is the degree to which technology is a tool. And for a long time, technology was a play box. It was a place where we imagined we could have fun things, and we wanted to focus on all the amazing things we could do and have this deterministic reality of like, if we just build it, cool things will happen. And, you know, Andy, in many ways, that's part of the fun that got you into all of this. I think one of the hardest parts about recognizing technology today is that technology has power. And when technology has power, the ethical issues come fast and furious, not because of technology, but because of any system of power. And that's why I think it's really important when we talk about this, that I think that the first critical ethical thinking is to remember that every technology has social, cultural, and political consequences. There's no way of avoiding it. There's no neutral technology. There's no apolitical technology. It is simply not possible. And therefore, when we think about ethics, we can't think about finding a way to avoid it in hopes that we can find a technology that won't get us into trouble. Every technology can backfire. And that's important because we can imagine all of the amazing and we can imagine all of the horrors. But part of the ethical thinking is to remember that this is part of a constant conversation. And to that second point, I think, you know, as Eric's pointing out, a lot of post-epistemic issues, I think it's a reminder that there is a humanistic component to this, that no technology can be designed purely with technologists. And that's one of the reasons why the ethics conversation is about getting people engaged. And so that's where I would say that the second issue that is an ethics issue is how to ensure that inequities are not baked into our systems, that they're not part of our organizations, that they're not part of our arrangement of power and money flows. We need to bring people to the table who are impacted by this. And that's critical to understand an ethical issue, because without it, we are going to not be able to see certain things. And we're going to watch our tools go in places we never would have imagined. And those will be horrible to see and watch.
Yeah, you're highlighting, Dana, the way these kinds of issues play into our social, political, economic, and even organizational systems, and the issues related to power. You know, I'd like to find a way to bring hear from our audience on these, what's top of mind for them too. And so we've listed some, not all of the ethical issues that typically come up, and we're keen to hear how our audience would pick the top of mind ones from the list that we're going to put in the chat and the screen. So if you want to cast your vote, please go to the vote here button that's located at the top of the chat column. We'd like to see what our audience thinks, at least of the ones that we've put in the list. Now, while the audience is doing that, I think both of you kind of alluded to the fact that we're going to have to think about what to do about this. I'd like to come back to that later, but I'm also curious about some of the other issues you didn't raise, such as the ethical issues related to our economic systems, for example. You spoke mostly about kind of bias and unfairness and justice and those kinds of issues. What about issues of economic issues?
Am I allowed to rant on late stage capitalism? That's usually a dangerous thing to do.
You can jump in for a little bit,
Dana.
Dana, but I'd love to see what also, I may interrupt you just to hear what came back from our poll. Well, that's interesting. Before you jump in, Dana, I see we've got the polling results up. That's interesting to see what people think. So sounds like most people think that these issues of bias and inequity are probably at the top of the list. That's interesting. And then Andy, and then Eric, you raised the issues of disinformation that also scored fairly high. But Dana, why don't you go ahead and say something about late stage capitalism as an ethical issue?
It's always a dangerous thing to let me go on this hobby horse. But I think part of it is when we're talking about inequities, we're talking about systems that have been set up for centuries to ensure that there are people who have and people who have not. And in our current context, that is very much part of our arrangement of economic power. And this is one of these interesting tricks to watch, like coming from the tech industry. When I was growing up, as a student of Andy's, we were just like, we were the geeks, we were the outsiders. Like people who wanted to make money, they went into Wall Street or maybe even management consulting. But you didn't go into tech to make money. You went to tech because you imagined possible futures. We're now in an environment where tech is very much about contemporary ways of making money. But it's more extreme than that. The expectation is that, you have to grow fast and furious. You blitz scaling. The problem with scaling at that level is you bulldoze over people. You exacerbate inequalities. And that's one of the problems about a system that expects you to have a return on investment quarter by quarter. And that is built and baked into the system. And technologists who are trying to avoid the late stage capitalism structures right now are really struggling to do it. You don't get the support to be able to do things that are really helpful for a small community. Everything has to be at scale. But when you're at scale, you're homogenizing and you're guaranteeing structural inequities. Right. And that's what pains me, because when we talk about those questions of inequity and bias, we have to look at the economic systems that are manifesting this over and over again, in addition to the political systems that Eric is pointing out that really shape, the geopolitical dynamics of this. That relationship of geopolitical power plus late stage capitalism is going to put us in a place that is going to result in all of these conversations like we've had for the last couple of weeks, right? Can Facebook even be a productive service?
No, I think you've articulated that very, very well, Dana. But it also brings me to this other conversation we often have in technology, which is, often when we talk about technology, we're kind of presented with these polarities. On the one hand, the unbounded opportunities and possibilities that probably brought many to technology. But on the other hand, we've got all these societal questions and harms and issues that you're raising. I'm just curious, how should we think about these kind of polarities? And, what's the right way to think about them? Maybe Eric will I'll go to you first. What do you think? How should we think about these?
Yeah, humanity has always had to grapple with the costs and benefits of powerful and enabling technologies. It goes back to the shaping of the first sharp objects by early Homo sapiens, the fashioning of our first fires, the widespread harnessing of electricity, flying machines, and now to the computational revolution. We've managed to get through it in many ways, valuable ways, to build civilization, leverage the powerful, useful, potentially dangerous technologies for great benefit via wise reflection, ongoing innovations around building insightful applications, developing best practices, standards on safety, performance, and robustness, and regulations. So I believe that we're in a unique position with computing, as I believe if you take folks like Dana and others as being on it, we're on it. It's heartening to see the fast-paced rise of interests in ethics and responsibility around computing, with discussions, research, mitigations on the technical and socio-technical and legal fronts. So I'm optimistic that by coming together across industry, academia, government, and civil society, we can address the costly behaviors and rough edges as big and as macro as they may be, and as uncertain as the influences are over time. And we can work continually for goals like shared prosperity, equity, fairness. We can work to weight the cost-benefit scale toward the benefit side for people in society. So let me just share some optimism, given that I started out with a couple of dark directions that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, no, thank you, Eric, for that. But you've both raised so many big questions and issues, and typically when these issues come up, there's several solutions that are typically suggested as the ways to address this. And here I'm going to suggest we go to the audience. I'm curious to hear what the audience thinks about this. So we're going to put up the typical things you hear, and there's 4 of them. And I'd be curious if the audience could pick which one, and it's just one, that they think is the most effective way to deal with these issues. So I think the poll is going to go up. If you could go to your to cast your vote, go to the vote here button that's at the bottom of the chat column to cast your vote. I'd be curious to see what the audience thinks. And actually, I'll be quite curious, Dana and Eric, if which one you would pick too. Oh wow! Did you see that? Can you see that result? Looks like the overwhelming favorite is regulation. That's interesting. So we may have to have another panel, another day to discuss regulation on these issues. But we're going to try to bring this to a close. And I wanted to come back as a final point of our conversation, perhaps to come back to our honoree, Andy. Andy's educated generations of computer scientists. And so it poses the question, how should we think about educating the next generation of computer scientists, given the sort of ethical issues we've discussed here? And here I'm going to start with you, Dana. Any quick last-minute thoughts on how should we educate the next generation? Eric, I'm curious to hear your thoughts too.
I mean, the thing that I think is important, we don't need to valorize people dropping out of school. Part of Andy's passion for undergrads is recognizing that you build whole, rich people who actually can understand different ways of seeing and different ways of knowing. And the richness of Brown is that it really encourages that. You're not just studying computer science, you're interacting with a humanistic, context. And that's where I think part of this goes to your polarities. We often, think government regulation because we're in a polarity moment. We know that things are wrong, they're painful, but we need to build people and processes and systems that have checks and balances. And that starts with every individual also being, educated in order to have those checks and balances, to think of people as part of our broader ecosystem, to really make education not just about learning how to do the technical work, but being able to see the technical work in a broader context.
That's pretty compelling. Eric, what would you add to that?
With great power and influence comes great responsibility. And here we are with computer science and computing technologies having such great power, more than I ever had expected as a graduate student myself in this field. And the great responsibility, and as Andy has led on, extends to educating students about responsibility. Computer science teachers absolutely must introduce considerations of ethics and responsibility into the curricula and work to nurture an ethos about key issues, potential outcomes, that computer scientists and engineers need to consider when they build and field technologies. It's been wonderful to see Andy and other computer science educators developing and sharing interdisciplinary content on values, ethics, and responsibilities. I see great value in having both standalone courses for undergraduates and graduate students, as well as modules that are integrated or embedded into the traditional classes on ethics, values, co-responsibilities, case studies with outcomes and uncertainties. Thinking deeply about the impact of computer science and computing applications in the complex open world is going to be and will continue to be an important area of reflection and a core component of computer science education. So thank you, Andy, for being a leader on these teaching responsibilities.
I think on that note, we're going to have to bring this to a close. Again, Dana and Eric, thank you. And Andy, congratulations again.
Congratulations, Andy.
Wow, thanks. More than ever, we need to have open discussions about the perils and the promise of technology. James, Dana, and Eric, thank you for your thought-provoking discussion. So now what do you say? Let's go back and check in on Gio and Estella and share how their graphical works have evolved. First, let's go see what Gio has created. Wow, he has come such a long way with his sculpture. And now it's in a completely different environment. This is cool. Now, let's check in on Estella. It's so incredible to see these creations are taking shape. It's so beautiful, and they're doing it so fast, but time is ticking. Probably should mention that both Gio and Estella told us that with a little bit more time, they would have been able to add so much more detail. But I think you'll agree that what we're seeing after just 20 minutes is pretty amazing. Okay, now we're just about ready to wrap it up. So add your final touches. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, time's up. Wow, those 20 minutes really flew by. So now I want to give our artists a chance to describe what they just created. So Gio, let's start with you. How about you tell us about your piece and how for you it is a manifestation of the CHM vision?
Thank you. So as I was sculpting this piece, in my head I was thinking of the orb symbolizing Earth, and the figure obviously symbolizing humanity, as humanity is holding on protectively onto the orb, and the ring around the figure with the blue light. In my head, I was thinking about it as it could symbolize technology, the circulation of technology, and how it flows through us and through the planet, and how we take care of it. So you know, it was a fun 20 minutes to come up with this idea, but yeah, I had fun and I'm fairly happy with it. So.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Gio, for creating such a beautiful sculpture. So now it's your turn, Estella, to tell us about your painting and how you approached the challenge. Share with us what you were thinking about.
Thank you. So I painted a lotus. It's symbolic of kind of optimism and hope in a dark time. I think a lot about this era in humanity right now, where we're all struggling and all affected by a global pandemic. And how will we come out from this era? And what do we do about climate change? What are we doing in terms of taking care of each other as human beings? So these are a lot of things that have been on my mind since early 2020, as we all have been faced with such trying times. And the lotus is something that came to mind for me, as it's a flower that grows in muddy waters. It's something that thrives in darkness. And I just love that analogy. And I think about how we as people are coming together and helping each other. And I believe that technology can really help humanity as well. I think that technology can be helpful for the environment and climate change. I think there's a major role in that. I've been learning a lot about plants and botany, and it's been something that's been at the forefront of my mind. So I believe the integration of technology, humanity, and nature can come together to really help resolve a lot of the problems that we have right now. And that's the future that I want to create in this world.
Well, Estella, that was fantastic to watch you paint, and thank you for your stunning piece. And I want to thank both of you for being part of tonight's program. So, Daniel?
That was amazing, captivating. Thank you, Gio and Estella, for sharing your creativity and demonstrating how you use these specialized tech tools to bring to life CHM's vision to shape a better future for humanity. If that's what the present looks like, I can't wait to see the future. And to help us paint that picture, we wanted to hear from you. So we pulled together a few of the videos that some of you have recently recorded on our virtual platform, including some of Andy's recent students, as well as others working at the intersection of technology and humanity. Voices for the Future.
Advancements in technology mean that everyone around the world, including people who may not have reliable access to food and water, have access to the internet. This tool can allow people everywhere to learn and grow and make change and connections if created and used with care. The future of humanity is inextricable from technology.
Understanding how these technologies affect broader society is one of the things that we'll need to be able to understand, because there are risks associated with some of these things. When you talk about disinformation, misinformation, and not to be too hyperbolic, but the future of democracy. And so these things matter.
My passion for technology came from not only understanding how it impacted our daily lives, but how it can actually inspire and empower the next generation to create a positive change in the world.
I think technology has transformed the way that people tell stories. As a graphic designer, I use technology every day to communicate through visual storytelling, whether that's through infographics, through web, through video, animation, anything like that. Technology has transformed the way that I'm able to communicate my ideas and the ideas of people around me to the world.
The next generation of technologists understand that there is great responsibility that comes with one's work, that there is value in slowing down to thoroughly consider the effects of our work. Tangibly, this could mean making sure that the software we design is accessible, or mitigating the environmental impact of computing, or even just reflecting individually on whatever it is we're working on.
As a teacher, I see how tech can help shape a better future for humanity every single day. And giving more students access to education is what really improves our world and is going to make the world a better place.
What can we possibly do to create the future? Because we're not bystanders. Every single one of us is a participant. So our job is not only to decode and to discover, but to use the knowledge to make it a better future.
As we close tonight, I'd like to thank my co-host Nancy Duarte and to each of our remarkable participants. And I want to extend my hearty congratulations to Andy as our newest Distinguished Fellow at CHM. We're inspired by your work and your impact, and we're honored to now count you as part of our museum collection and the Fellows community. Now, let's return to where we began. CHM, Computing, Humanity, and Meaning. These are threads that provide meaning and connect all of us in the past, present, and future. In a 1945 article published in The Atlantic entitled, "As We May Think," Vannevar Bush, an icon of science, laid out a groundbreaking view of what would be possible in the information age. That fall, in a Red Cross library in a hut set on stilts at the edge of the jungle on a Philippine island, a young Navy radar technician stumbled across an issue of that magazine and read Bush's article, which he subsequently credited for aligning his sights along the vector Bush had described. Fast forward 23 years. In 1968, that radar technician turned visionary, Doug Engelbart, presented the mother of all demos nearby in San Francisco, a landmark event which redefined the technological and social aspects of personal computing. As we heard earlier in the program, in the audience that day was Andy Van Dam. As so many have testified tonight through their stories and tributes, Andy has influenced how we interact with computers. He's exemplified how an innovator can impact multiple fields, how an educator and a mentor can transform the lives of generations of students who in turn are affecting millions of lives around the world. Van Dam, Engelbart, Bush. We're heirs to their legacy of amplifying human potential and unleashing creativity for the greater good of humanity. And their story is now part of our story. And that story is still unfolding. And CHM is transforming how we play a role in that story for millions around the world. So I'll close tonight with a call to action, inspired by the words of Vannevar Bush. He closed his 1945 article in this way: "The applications of science have built man a well-supplied house and are teaching him to live healthily therein. They've enabled him to throw masses of people against one another with cruel weapons. He may perish in conflict before he learns to wield that for his true good. Yet, in the application of science to the needs and desires of man, it would seem to be a singularly unfortunate stage to lose hope as to the outcome." Here at CHM, we raise a banner of hope for the possibility to wield technology for our true good. Standing on the shoulders of giants, we can unlock the potential of human creativity. And building on the strengths of diverse voices, we can harness technology to serve everyone. As digital citizens, we can, in fact, we must work together to shape a better future for all of us.